You are listening to Wize Move Wisdom, the podcast series brought to you by the Wize Move Society, the global movement where elders connect, share, learn, and create. In this fourth series, we focus on the wisdom of the elders, stories with a message. At its heart is a belief we hold deeply in our community that the collective wisdom of people who have truly lived is one of the most underused forces for good in the world today. Our guests aren't just sharing stories, but they are living proof of our community's core belief that the wisdom of the older generation is a force for global change, not a relic to be achieved. We strongly believe that a collective wisdom matters to the world right now, a world that is desperately calling out for change, positive change. We believe that by sharing the stories of the elders, we can contribute to a world that is more humane, more connected, more conscious, and more sustainable. A world we will be proud to leave to the next generations. My name is Ingun Bol, and I'm the founder of the Wize Move Society. Enjoy this episode of Wize Move Wisdom. So today, I'm really excited that we're here with Maggie McKee from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So it's really the other side of the world while I'm moving into the evening. You just got out of bed and starting the new day. So that's fantastic. And yes, we met a couple of months ago in a webinar, and there was just something happening, and you mentioned something, and I thought, well, I really need to talk to Maggie. And we had a wonderful conversation last week, and I'm really, really excited that you're here now in this podcast recording. So, welcome, Maggie.
Thank you, Ingen. I was so surprised when you called me and said that you wanted to have the conversation. I was thrilled, and I thought, who, me? So I'm really glad that we're doing this because I like to contribute to the world, and I know that it really does come through communication, storytelling, music, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we met last week, I was like, I don't even remember what happened in that webinar, but I just, that there's that moment that you feel like, yes, we need to talk. And actually, when we did talk, and now that you say, why me? We talked about so many things, and you have had such an amazing life already, and you're still, very entrepreneurial. So I think there's a lot to talk about and a lot of wise lessons to share. So let's dive into the material. And yes, we talk about the wisdom of the elders, stories with a message. Wisdom of the elders, what does that mean to you? From your perspective, who are the elders?
Well, for me, it's always been the indigenous term
Yeah.
for the wise people in the tribe, and hadn't really worn that hat until we had that conversation. And the more I think about it, the more it is an honorary position to hold, and it's what has kept civilizations moving forward through all the generations. It's the wisdom that we gather from our elders, even if they don't consider themselves to be that way, and that we pass on and we transform it for the time that we live in. That's what I think is really interesting about being an elder. The stories are always what are the vehicle, but the time that we live in is the circumstances in which we place those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And is it something that you use regularly? That storytelling, that really going deep and back into your own story. Do you use it?
I do with my family a lot, and with my friends. I love stories because there's that heart center to a story that you don't get from a fact, let's say. And in my business, as you know, people will do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And I think that stories are the foundation for building that. And because the work that I do with the Japanese company in wellness is all about it's all about the stories that are created by our decision to surround ourselves with these modern technologies that mimic nature and keep us healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I do. And starting with a story and not with facts, you attract that attention. And I really like what you're saying, that build that trust. Yeah, share something about yourself. Also is an invitation for others to do that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so we also talk about those different roles in the new concept of the Wize Move Society. We have those, the storyteller, the mentor, the bridge builder, the healer, and the leader. Is there a role that you feel that relates to you most?
Well, I see myself in all of those. Like, I'm going to be 80 in a couple of weeks, so I've had a lot of time in my life to experience a lot of things. And I think the one that's most prevalent, two that really stick together, are mentoring and storytelling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those two are, and I think with there's always bridge building that happens in communication. And I am I am really, really interested in how people don't communicate so that I can be a better communicator. My experience is that most people really don't feel heard. They
Mm-hmm.
talk, they have conversations,
Yeah.
but it's usually this person says something which triggers something that this person tells their story, and there's really not that sense of being heard. So I think in storytelling, one of the key things for me is listening
Yeah.
and allowing the silence. That it's like in music, silence is what makes music, right? It's the space between the notes. And I think that's true in conversation as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you are still very active in music, so I love to hear a little bit later also about that part of your life because you still play in a band. That's really fantastic. So I love what you do with to use that metaphor of the music. And I know that last week we had someone in the podcast series. She really relates to those metaphors, and that is something that is the language of the heart she mentioned, and
Yes.
of the soul, and that is something that really because yes, we talk to one another. And mostly it's facts. I do this, I do that. That is, it's a lot of facts. But what we're looking for is meaning.
Very much so. And I was born 80 years ago into a world that really was very masculine.
Mm-hmm.
I was born on a farm, so there was always a lot of work to do. We weren't allowed to be sick. If we felt sick, my mother would say, "Get outside, get some fresh air, drink some water, and go get the cattle."
Yeah.
So I learned to be tough, but I prefer to call that resilient now, because being tough when I was growing up was how I was, that's how my nervous system was trained for survival, because I had like a lot of people. I mean, I've had emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all of those things. And those don't even matter to me in the sense that it's not what happens in our life. It's how we interpret that, how we take that forward in our lives. And there was a time in my life when I really could play the victim, like poor me, my big brother was really mean. I was
Mhm.
abused, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was in a workshop once, and the facilitator said, "I'm going to ask you to write two stories about your childhood. The first is the story that, is not so shiny, the one where you can really talk about what happened. And the other is the positive side, the side where there was magic and love." And I was so transformed by writing those two stories because I realized that I had chosen the victim story,
Yeah.
and that wasn't going to take me where I wanted to go in my life. I was in my 30s, I think, by then. So I have been, for the last 50 years, basically, looking at ways to be responsible, to choose how I respond rather than react, and to
Mm-hmm.
take whatever happens to me. Like, I just had a really bad fall a week ago, And I could whine and, yeah, my leg hurts and blah, blah, blah. But I see it as an opportunity to realize how resilient I am. I fell quite a ways and I hit many parts of my body and I'm fine. I'm going to have to heal because I'm very bruised.
Yeah.
But I could have used that as a pity party,
Yeah.
like poor me, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
I choose not to because that doesn't serve anything in my world
No.
now.
No. No. Yeah, it's also part of that storytelling is to be able to retell the story of someone else in a positive way.
Yes.
In this situation, you could have chosen the victim role, but other people often do that, to choose that victim role. While if someone else is sharing the same story, that they can see what the positive sides are. Yeah.
And I think, in this world that we're in right now, the way it looks to most people is it's scary, and if you play victim, the really cool thing about playing victim is it takes away any responsibility. You don't have to do anything if you're the victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're the victor, that doesn't work either because that's power over, you know. And so choosing that place where you say, okay, what's good in here? I've had so many times in my life where life looked pretty grim. And,
Mm-hmm.
I chose to, at the time, probably have a pity party, but I've learned to take my thumb out of my mouth and get on with life and say, okay, what came out of that? What was the good that came from all of that? For instance, with my brother, I learned to deal with people who are violent,
Yeah.
and I learned to um, get out of the way if I could, and if not, to just deal with that and move forward and not even blame that person
Mm-hmm.
because they have a story. They don't come by that naturally. That's from trauma in their own lives, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that compassion and understanding of other people helps me to have a better sense of what's possible in the world when you view it through a different lens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also it is that part of that lived experience of the elders
Yes.
that they see, looking back at all these things that have happened, with your brother and all this trauma that you have seen, but also what came out of it. So you are able to have overlooked the whole situation, while, the younger ones, with all respect, because there's a lot of wisdom there as well, there's that lived experience is not yet there. So the transformation into something positive and really looking at it from a different perspective is not yet there.
That's a really good summary because we were both young ones and I didn't
Oh
have
no, but
I have no, yeah. And so to have that, I mean, I have six grandchildren. The oldest one is 23, the youngest one is 4. So there's a lot of living going on and there's a lot of experience happening that as a grandmother, I can hold the container for them
yeah.
to share what's going on and reflect that and show compassion, not judgment, and
Mhm.
hopefully help them to make the best of any situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Um, One of the things I asked you, and maybe to prepare a little bit, is to share a story with a message for, those who are listening, maybe the younger generation, but it can also be, people of our age. Doesn't matter, people listening and feel inspired by what you have to share. So I'm just giving the floor to you.
Thanks. And I thought about this a lot because there's so many stories, and I think let me just go back to being a child where I didn't feel, I mean, my parents were wonderful, but they were tired, they were busy, they were not emotionally available or emotionally intelligent, let's say.
Mhm.
So I didn't have a sense of self worth. However, I had a grandfather. I only had 2 living grandparents, but my grandfather, he was so special. And it was the little things like he would drive out to the farm from the city in his big Buick and he would put me in the front seat beside him on the way to church because I was curious about religion. I always have been. I don't understand it particularly, but I'm curious. So I would go, and then he would pick up the little old ladies who couldn't get to church by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be driving along, and it was probably, only a 20 or 30-minute drive, but he would say, almost every time in my memory, he would say, don't even ask. This is my beautiful granddaughter. And even if you gave me $1 million, I would not give her to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I didn't think anything of it at the time, but reflecting on that, I remember feeling tall. I remember feeling loved. I remember feeling important.
Yeah.
And I didn't see my grandfather that much, but that was such a profound experience for a child who felt unloved, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with my 6 grandchildren, I mean, I'm the love bunny, right? Love all over them. And so going forward, then I was the first one in my family from the farm, and I was the youngest to go to university. So I thought, wow, I've made it. And it was all about competing and being the best and getting the best marks and blah, 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 which was a fool's game, I realize now. However, at the time, it got me to a situation where I could have maybe a more objective view of my life. And then when I had a back issue that started when I was a teenager. And when I was 33, my orthopedic surgeon said, you must have this surgery or your internal organs are going to be collapsed by the curve in your spine. And I already had one child who was 6, I think, 7. No, I was pregnant at the time. So I had a 5-year-old, and the doctor said, well, we can't do surgery till after you've had your baby and you've had at least a year to recover. So when my younger son was 2.5, I had this incredibly invasive surgery where they basically filleted me, opened my back up, put rods in, jacked me up. I grew, 2.5 inches on the operating table. And then I was in a body cast for a 1.5 years, 14 months. And I have a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm at home all day with the 2-year-old, right? And I can't do anything, Damien, other than, I'm a turtle lying on the bed. And the best I can do is when my son comes in about 10:30 in the morning and lifts my eyelid and said, you want tea, mommy? Which means he's hungry. So I would manage to get myself out of bed and get to the kitchen, make myself a cup of tea and give him some milk and cookies. Anyway, it was transformative in the sense that for the woman who was always being competitive and the top of everything, to be able to do nothing, it's like my train hit the train coming in the tunnel, So it was a time for me to reflect, which I hadn't done much in my life. I was just a doer. You probably can relate.
In control, be in control. Yeah.
Absolutely, because that was the only safety I had, right? As long as I could feel in control, I could feel like, I was going to be safe. So here I am, barely able to get out of bed, barely able to do anything. And I start reflecting, and it became very contemplative. And then I started reading and this is the era when self-help books really started to come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Started reading books, and I formed a book club on this one book that literally changed my life by Eric Butterworth. I forget what it was called now, but it really hit my belief that I didn't even know I had, that instead of the either or, it was a very Eastern philosophy of both and. So in chaos, there's also creativity and all those things back and forth. So I really got into that study, and it changed my life because for the first time in my life, I was forced to take the time to not do, but to be, right? So, I recovered from that, obviously, moved forward. And so that was the background, my grandfather and my surgery. And then I decided to study theology. I did a master's in theology. And my thesis was based on my work. I was working at a community college at the time as a professor, and I was working on personal development and that sort of thing, which was pretty gutsy at that time in a post-secondary environment because, education was facts.
Yeah.
Here I was focusing on experience and feelings. So my thesis was called Mutual Midwifery. And the subtitle was How We Give Birth to Ourselves and Others in a Safe and Supportive Environment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So that really became my framework for how I taught, how I did business, how I was in relationships, because always as a teacher for 30 years, for me it was about the environment in the classroom that allowed students to bring forth what they already knew, because that is the definition of education. It's to draw forth the knowledge that is already within people, right? That wasn't the model that we were taught. But I loved my students. I particularly loved the neurodiverse ones, although we didn't even use that term back in the day.
No, we had no
And,
idea.
and
Yeah.
the rebels. I mean, I was a rebel, so I knew how to handle these rebels, right? So that became my sort of, I don't know, metaphor for life. And it's when I look back, it's so different from the competitive. If you don't get the best mark in the class, there's something wrong with you. You remember the mistakes you made, not the things you
But
got
you
right.
did well. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it makes my life so beautiful now. I am so grateful. I'm so relaxed. Whatever comes, like this fall last week was, oh well, you know, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the biggest transformation, having to stop so abruptly and to look at, okay, who am I really? And I spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on personal development workshops, retreats, and I don't regret a penny of it, because it all has helped me to become the person I'm still becoming, and to be that compassionate heart for others.
And like what you say, I'm the person who is still becoming. You say you're almost 80 years old, but you're still in that process of growth and evolvement and yeah, so many aspects of your life that are still, yeah, growing.
And to me, as a grandmother and a mother, that's really important, because I want my children and my grandchildren to see that life is so beautiful, that, you know, whatever the question, the answer is love, right? So, and I know that my grandchildren, even the 4-year-old, she was just here from Toronto for a week, and
Hmm.
my band played a concert, and I gave her and my other granddaughter, who's 10, shakers, and they were our accompanying musicians. And my son, who is a great drummer, and we didn't have a drummer, he played the drums. So it was a really great family affair. And the joy that these little girls were having, just standing there moving to the music, and being part of, this whole outdoor concert, it was truly a joy for me.
How amazing is that to be able to share that now with your grandchildren?
Yes, yes.
That's really fantastic because last time you told me a lot about, the life that you had, and it's, half an hour is not long enough to share about, all the times that you went through and the trips that you made on your own in Europe, and it's that's fantastic. But to be able to share these things now, to still enjoy yourself, the music, but to see the joy back in how they respond to it. That's amazing.
It is, and I think, I'm one of the things I do as a grandmother. I have two children. One lives here, so he and his 3 kids and his wife, almost every weekend we have a family dinner at my place.
Okay.
And that's sort of a tradition that, I always sat down to eat on the farm. Nobody went into the living room and watched TV, that sort of thing. So it's a rule. We sit, and I remember when my grandchildren had iPhones right in the beginning, and I said, "Okay, come here, guys." And I said, "Do you see any place setting for an iPhone at this table?" That's all I had to say.
Mm-hmm.
They've never brought their
Yeah.
phones to the table. And they really don't use their phones a lot. The older ones, these are the older ones. They just kind of they're part of the conversation.
How special is that?
I
Wonderful.
grew up on an intergenerational farm because that's how farming worked in the day. My grandparents were gone, my great grandfather was gone, but when we did anything, everybody was involved. We didn't have babysitters. We went to the parties with my parents, and we would play hard and do pretty reckless things, and fall asleep on the floor. And when it was time to go home, my parents would pile us in the car and we would drive back to the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And my children include me in their parties. And I love that because it gives me a sense of not that I want to be important, but that I matter
Yeah.
and that I have something to contribute to them. And yeah, I'm just so blessed.
So, being a grandmother myself, I can so relate to this to these stories. Looking at your story and at your life, what is your biggest life lesson that you want to share, not only with your grandchildren, but also, you work with a lot of people in your business. What is your biggest life story that you feel like, yes, this is really something I need to leave that behind. I need to bring that to the next generation.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure it's about doing, it's about being. It's who I be. And because my mantra every day is I am here to create joy and connection, which leads to possibilities that may not have been discovered without that connection. So it's that willingness to go for a walk and talk to dogs and people and
Mhm.
just be really engaging rather than listening to a podcast or whatever, but
Mhm.
really be in the world with people. And I love seeing the light in people's eyes when they feel listened to and they feel heard. So I think that's the legacy that I want to leave, is that life is what you make it. How you view yourself in the world, the mind is the place where the feelings and the actions are determined, really. So if we have a positive mindset, if we have a mantra, if we have an intention to make the world a better place, the more of us, especially, the wise elders, the more we do that, the more the next generations are likely to learn from that just by osmosis. It's not like we're saying you have to do this or you have to do that. It's not about giving them adages and, reading them fairy tales. It's about living a life that that is so full of possibilities, no matter what your age, and that you look at ways to make the best out of a situation if possible. And I always look at that from the point of love.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. And how important do you think it is for the wise elders to share their stories, to make the circle around?
Well, if we look at history, that's the way it's always been in the civilizations that we know about, particularly the indigenous people.
Yeah.
The stories help us to understand our origins,
Hmm.
and they can be beyond the physical origins. Where do we come from? The creation story is the same in just about every religion, every language. So there's a sense of a container that we're in, where who we are is connected back and forward. So if when I tell that story about my grandfather, my grandchildren hear that and they feel that, and they have my love and other grandparents' love, so they will pass that forward, because what the world needs now is love, sweet love. We know
Yes,
that
we
song,
do. Yeah.
because there is so much fear, and to me fear and love are the same spectrum but the opposite ends, right? So if you can look at things from uh, the position of love rather than fear, you don't fear makes us freeze, it makes us afraid, it makes us run, it makes us attack. Love opens, and helps us to embrace I really believe that we're all these loving beings that, are here to learn how to be that without being swept away by the current events and the I don't want to swear, the mess.
Yeah, the
That
mess. Yeah.
if you look at it, it looks like a mess. But when you get under that, there's always something beautiful.
Thank you. I'm not going to add anything to that. The only thing is that I want to go back to the beginning that you said, I have no idea why she asked me to share a story. Well, I think you've given so much wisdom to those who are listening and to me. That is, and I know there are so many more stories in you. So I would absolutely share more of your stories. And you already mentioned that you do it and you use it also, with your family, with your grandkids, but also in your work. And I think that is really inspiring. So. Thank you very much, Maggie, for being here.
Thank you. This has been very fun and uplifting for me because, I live alone and sometimes I get into this place of who am I, And it's when I have connections with people like you who really have such a beautiful view of the world and a huge heart and huge love. And we resonate together on that I really do believe that vibration is making a difference in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
And
think
I think that's your intention, right?
yes. Yeah. There's still so much to do. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You absolutely contribute to that outcome. And I think, the thing that I also want to share, well, prove that we as elders, because we are those elders, that we need to share our stories and we need to step into that role of how can we bring more into the world that, well, yes, will help contribute to a better world.
Yes.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us and listening to our podcast, Wisdom of the Elders Stories with a Message. I hope you enjoyed this story and were inspired. If you feel aligned with the podcast brought to you by the Wize Move Society, please follow us on Spotify. But of course, we would like to welcome you at our global online community, where you can share your wisdom in deep conversations with our members. But we also would like to hear your story and learn from it. All stories matter. We believe that our collective wisdom can bring change at many levels. In the next episode, we travel to a different part of the world, another elder, another story, another lesson carried across lifetime. Until then, share your story. Someone is waiting for it.